A man's Yelp review reveals that his problems go beyond just the bad restaurant service that he received. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to focus on a fun short story that I've encountered. One that is about a bad Yelp review, which is pretty unusual and very fitting for this channel. I am referring to Jerry's Crab Shack, 1 star, a fun title, by Gwen Kirby, which was published in her short story collection, Shit, Cassandra Saul, and was published in 2022. For those who don't know, Gwen Kirby is an American writer who has been writing, I'd probably say, for the past 10 years, or at least getting their work published for the past 10 years. They serve as a professor, which is pretty cool in their non-writing time. And they really only got one book published thus far. It is this. Some of their short stories that appear here have also been published in various magazines, journals, etc., stuff like that. And that's pretty much all I know about this writer. Not a lot of information available about them, especially because they're pretty, recently published. But I would be interested in seeing more of their work in the future, especially because I liked what I found here. I do think that if Gwen Kirby expanded her ideas, wrote a full novel or something like that, it'd be a pretty big, pretty good, I would say, based on her prose that I've encountered so far. So looking forward to more from her. But without further ado, let's talk about Jerry's Crab Shack, 1 star. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Jerry's Crab Shack is presented as a narrative told through a Yelp review written by a man named Gary F. Gary is writing a bad review because he had a bad experience at the Baltimore Jerry's Crab Shack, and he also felt that the other reviews were too flattering, and so he wanted to sort of set the record straight. He notes that the restaurant is in a bad part of town. His car was broken into. He notes that there was bad service at the restaurant. The people were unkind. Everything was really slow. They never really got their food. But as the story progresses, as the review progresses, we see that the review kind of goes deeper. There's a lot that Gary is getting off of his chest here. He notes that his wife they recently moved to a new house in Baltimore because they couldn't afford to live in DC, which is where Jerry's job is located. So he now has to take a little bit of a drive. Gary has his doubts about moving to Baltimore, but he goes along with his wife because he believes that she knows what is best. But she does think that he could be more assertive. If he wasn't happy with moving, he should have said something. That seems to be a bit of an argument that they've had recently. He also begins rating his wife, noting that she's particularly empathetic, has many other great qualities. He loves his wife. He finds her attractive, but she can be a little bit mean at times. And so you see a little bit of him talking about that and sort of evaluating his relationship. And then as the story goes back to the review, he has an argument, or he notes an argument that he had with the bartender asking where the food was, and the bartender told him that, it'll be here when it'll be here. And the bartender also told him that he was dressed like a he used a homophobic slur, essentially, which only happened because Gary thought that this was a fancy restaurant, and he dressed up, and his wife dressed up in their best, which seems to aggravate some of the locals at this particular restaurant, which upsets Gary. He's being called the homophobic slur. he chooses not to argue with the bartender and goes back to his table, but his wife is unhappy that he hasn't stood up for himself. And so rather than waiting for their food, they just decide to leave. They go to a Wendy's, and Gary notes as the story comes to a close that he's never had what some people are claiming to be the best seafood sandwiches in Baltimore, and he doesn't really care. He'll just have to live without that. But even though he managed to get out of the situation, there's still some trouble in the relationship that seems to be going forward, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a fair bit to talk about with Jerry's Crab Shack 1 star, which is a fantastic title. I love it. Most of the short stories in this collection are particularly absurd. Like their titles are absurd. I think Gwen Kirby has a knack for naming things in the most unusual way possible. Sometimes, like when you see with the titular story, Shit Cassandra Saw, I couldn't use that in a short story video that for YouTube, because it would probably get removed by the algorithm, or it wouldn't be made available. So maybe partially I chose this one because it's a very normal short story title, although still very strange. But I guess I'm curating some things, because you can't have swear words in YouTube videos, or else people will people won't really see those videos. So that's more of a personal concern than anything else, but I do like the title and the titles that Gwen Kirby is using here. I also like the review framing of the story. The story is told in the context of a Yelp review. I've seen a couple stories that have served in that capacity before, and I particularly like it because the format allows for some interesting storytelling. Non-conventional, sort of postmodern type storytelling, but good storytelling nonetheless. It allows for the reader to see how the problem is only partly related to the service. That as the story goes along, you see more factors become at play in the story, particularly with the relationship, which I'll talk about in a few moments. But the way the story unfolds is done pretty well because of the review nature of the story. And I think it's ultimately very creative, one of the more creative short stories that I've talked about on this channel before. But the main theme that Gwen Kirby is working with here is that of the troubled relationship. Kirby slowly reveals deeper relationship problems in the story between Gary and his wife. Things are not working as well as one could hope. What seems to be a casual dinner that goes awry between two people is actually this is actually just an attempt to work out a rocky time in the relationship. They've moved to a new area, and there's some frustrations in dealing with one another, and maybe this dinner is going to help them sort of re-find that love, or just sort of have a good time and remember why they're married in the first place. But there's the difficulties seem to lie in moving. One of them didn't really want to move. Gary didn't really want to move, but he didn't announce his difficulties or his trouble with moving. His wife wants him to be more assertive and stand up for himself, which we can see he doesn't really do in the story when it comes time to stand up for himself, to sort of not let someone just walk all over you. The review is done in a way that allows you to sort of see how it's more than just the bad service at the restaurant that's the problem. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. Food took 45 minutes, or rather I should say, after 45 minutes, things at the table had become tense. We were both tired and very hungry. Moving is a lot of work. There have been more than a few nights spent eating leftover pizza on the floor because the new table we ordered online is stuck in a warehouse in St. Louis. And even when my wife called the company and used her most terrifying voice, they told her that we would have to wait, that they were working on it. And there you can just see how he just moves from the wait at the restaurant was weird. It was strange. It was it suggested that we weren't their priority. It wasn't very good table service. like, he quickly moves from that to, showing why that's exactly a problem, like the overall stress of it. Not many people would have the same situation there, so maybe that's why the other people reviewed it so highly. But you can see how the underlying troubled relationship is affecting maybe their mood, and their overall experience at this restaurant. Now, even though things seem to be a little bit rocky, there is some love that is still present. Kirby shows that there's loyalty between the husband towards the wife. He moved to Baltimore with her because he felt that she was making the right choice. And he didn't say anything because he was loyal. He didn't want to say, oh, we shouldn't do that, because you trust that you're the person you love is making the right choice. There's some empathy there as well, especially because the wife saw that Gary, he notes that he wanted to go to school to get a master's degree in musicology, and she paid for it. Because she was a lawyer at the time, and she really wanted him to be happy and have what he wanted, even if it was like a weird degree. But she had a sense of empathy, and I think that remains in the relationship at the time that the story is taking place. And there's a willingness to work on this relationship, clearly by both parties, because Gary, we see in his review that he wants things to work out, and the wife showed up to this restaurant, which was clearly an act to work on the relationship and see, if the love was still there. And even though things didn't really work out, there is that attempt to work on things rather than ignore the problem and hope that it goes away. But I think that's what's necessary in order for the relationship to really thrive, is you got to want to work on it. And Kirby is demonstrating that very well in the story, is that every relationship takes effort, especially to work on the areas where things aren't going that well, to work on the areas that need improvement. You can't just sit by and hope that they'll get better. You have to make an effort, which is what Gary is ultimately trying to do, and I'm sure his wife is trying to do as well. But I also like what Kirby is doing here, is because she's also showing the crossroads that this man is at. This seems like one of the big hurdles for the relationship, and it's something that's going to prove whether it's going to stand the test of time or not. And so the review really shows that Gary is at this crossroads, that he's at this point where he has to evaluate whether this relationship is going to continue, whether he can work out these problems with his wife, or if something unfortunate is going to happen, if a divorce or a separation is going to take place. But the way that Kirby tells the story, it certainly makes this crossroads feel more lively, feel more apparent, which again, that's a lot of credit to the framing of the story. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Jerry's Crab Shack, 1 star. Again, a very interesting title. Probably one of the better short stories that I've read recently. Certainly, it's very short, but it definitely stands out, and I really like the framing of the story. I definitely recommend that you seek this out, possibly find this at your local library like I did. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have interesting short story collections. Otherwise, don't forget to, like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author or this short story or this book if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and review-leaving travels. Farewell.